Have you ever looked at African hair and wondered why it can curl, coil, shrink, stretch, twist, or even completely change its shape? One day it's short, the other day it's coiled, the day after it's long, and after just washing it, it just has a different texture and feel. And that can actually be science, and there's a science behind it because of the way it looks. We are going to look at why African hair has its unique texture and why it shapes, why it shrinks, why it can feel different from one person to another, and why understanding the science can completely change the way we care for it. So let's talk about African hair. So let's start from the basics. Hair is mainly made up of a protein called keratin. Keratin gives hair its structure and strength, but the shape of a strand is influenced by several factors, including the structure of the hair follicles, the way the hair grows from the scalp, the arrangement of the protein within the hair. In simple terms, the follicle acts a little like the pathway through which the hair emerges. A more circular follicle tends to produce a tighter strand, while a more curved or elliptical follicle is associated with curlier hair. This is why two people can both have natural hair but have completely different curls pattern. And there is something else that's important. The shape isn't necessarily the same across the entire head. The shape isn't necessarily across the entire head. You might have tighter curls at the back, looser curls at the front, or completely different texture around your edges. So what we talk about when we talk about African hair, we are not talking about one single texture. African hair is incredibly, immensely diverse.
Turns out that human hair shape is programmed from the follicle, and a follicle is basically a little house or a little tunnel in your scalp where the growing hair emerges. There are these cells that are rapidly dividing in these follicles, and as they divide, they push up the cells that are higher up, and then those eventually come out of your scalp and become your hair. These are biopsies of human scalps. You can imagine that a hole punch was used to kind of extract a little chunk of scalp, and there were follicles left in. If you look at panel A, you can see that the highly curly hair is emerging from a curled follicle. Compare that with panel G, where the follicle is completely straight and it's producing a straight hair. And in the middle, you can actually see an intermediate conformation. This person in the study is what in Trinidad would be referred to as a dogla, so somebody who is of African and Indian heritage, and they happen to have an intermediate hair texture. If we zoom in a little more closely, we can also see that the follicle exhibits what is called retrocurvature. Retro meaning back and curvature meaning curve. So the base of the follicle has a little curve in it. It curves a little bit backwards. And that only happens in hair with texture and not in straight hair. Essentially, a follicle is like a mold that gives your hair its shape. Because the opening that the rapidly dividing cells of your follicles are pushed through has a crescent shape, kind of like the moon, kinky hair is elliptical and not round as you would see in straighter textures. Here you can see how a texture fiber looks. There's a wide face and a narrow face. Contrastingly, this is what straighter fibers tend to look like.
Now, let's talk about texture. When people describe hair or coils, kinky, curly or tight, they're usually talking about shape and the diaphragm of the hair strand. Some African hair form defined curls, some form very tight coils, and some have a pattern that almost looks like a tiny spring. One interesting character of tightly coiled hair is that the strands bend repeatedly along its length. Those bends are part of what gives coily hair its beautiful shape, but they also mean the hair can be more vulnerable to mechanical stresses. Think about a piece of wire. If you repeatedly bend the same area, eventually it can become weaker. Hair isn't wire or coarse, but repeated manipulation can similarly contribute to breakage, especially when the hair is dry or handled tightly. This is one reason gently handling African hair matters so much. Detangling, brushing, styling, braiding, or even sleeping can create mechanical stress on the hair. So the goal isn't to avoid touching your hair completely. It's about understanding your hair and learning how to handle it properly. And now, to the most interesting thing about natural African hair, shrinking. You can have hair that reaches your shoulders when stretched, but when it dries naturally, suddenly it looks much shorter. Where did all the hair go? Nowhere. It's still there. The hair has simply returned towards its natural curl or coil pattern. Imagine a spring. When you stretch a spring, it becomes longer. When you release it, it returns towards its original shape. Coily hair can behave in a somewhat similar way. The tighter the coil pattern, the more dramatic the difference between the stretching, the length, its natural appearance can be. This is why measuring natural hair can sometimes be confusing. Your hair may not appear to be growing because the visible length isn't changing dramatically. But what does necessarily mean growth hasn't stopped. Your hair can be growing from scalp while simultaneously curling back on itself, and that's why shrinkage isn't necessarily a problem. Shrinkage is actually evidence of hair elasticity and curl structure. When we talk about African hair, we mostly talk about dryness. Ensure your hair is moisturized. I always think this when I'm doing my hair videos. One reason is the structure of the curls. Natural hair oils produced by the scalp called sebum have to travel along the hair shaft. On tighter strands, the path is relatively direct. But on a tightly coiled strand, the bends and the curls and the curves can make it more difficult for those oils to spread evenly across the length. This can contribute to the ends feeling drier than the roots. And remember, dryness and damage are not exactly the same thing. Dry hair is hair that lacks sufficient moisture and flexibility. Damaged hair has structural changes caused by things such as excessive heat, chemical processing, friction, or mechanical stress. This is why a good hair routine isn't simply about putting as many products on your head. It's about moisture conditioning, gentle handling, reducing unnecessary manipulation, and protecting the hair from excessive damage. And sometimes less really is more. Before I come to the end of this video, one of the most beautiful things about African hair, it is versatility. The fact that it can be manipulated to different things. The same head of hair can look completely different depending on how you style it. You can wear it in an afro, you can twist it, you can braid it, you can stretch it, you can define the curls, you can wear locks, you can use protective styles. And the interesting part is that many of these styles don't change what your hair fundamentally is. Fundamentally, whatever. They temporarily change. It temporarily just changes its shape. Water, tension, heat, styling techniques, and humidity can all influence how the hair looks. That's why natural hair can seem like it has a personality of its own. You wash it and suddenly the curls appear. You stretch it and suddenly you discover all that length. You braid it and when you take the braids out, you get an entirely different or extensively different pattern. Same hair, different shape, and that's part of the African hair magic. That's what I like. Like you can just manipulate your hair to anything you want, any day, anytime. And when you think I've given you so much information about African hair, we are not talking about one thing: texture. One thing I think we need to stop doing in treating African hair as though everyone has the same texture. No, we don't. There is enormous variation of African hair. Hair density can differ, strand thickness can differ, curl pattern can differ, porosity differs, elasticity can differ. And I think this is one of the things that Said I'll talk about. And even within one person's head, the hair can behave differently in different areas. That's why copying someone else's hair routine doesn't always produce the same results. True. Trust you me. This is like something I can tell you. And what works beautifully for one person may not work the same way for another person. Understanding your own hair is much more useful than trying to force it to behave like someone else's. Your hair doesn't need to look like somebody else's hair to be healthy. And it doesn't need to be extremely long, extremely thick, or perfectly defined to be beautiful. Your hair is as beautiful as it is, and treat it as to the capacity and the level that is it. And in one of the coming videos, we will talk about how to measure porosity, the different oils that you need to place in your different hairs. And so, the next time you look at African hair, don't just see curls and coils, see the science. See the keratin that gives the strands its structure. See the follicles that influences the shape. See the bends and the curls that create the beautiful patterns. See the shrinkage that hides length without taking it away. See the versatility that allows one hair of head to transform into many different styles. African hair is not difficult hair. It's hair with a unique structure that requires understanding. And perhaps most important part of learning about our hair is realizing that our natural texture can never sometimes need to be fixed. It needed to be understood. It needed to be cared for. It needed to be appreciated. So whether your hair forms loose curls, tight coils, an afro, or a combination of different texture, learn it. Listen to it. Take care of it. Embrace it, because African hair isn't just about how it looks. It's science, its identity, its versatility, and beauty growing right from our roots. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who wants to understand African hair a little better. And it will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.